This is a video lesson for how to calculate a vector sum in one dimension. The learning target for this lesson is, I am learning to calculate a vector sum in one dimension. The success criteria for this lesson are, I can calculate a vector sum in one dimension when both vectors are pointing in the same direction, and I can calculate a vector sum in one dimension when the vectors are pointing in opposite directions. Okay, so how do we add vectors in one dimension? So in one dimension we mean basically something like on a number line. So you can add vectors in one dimension on the xy axis or on the x-axis or on the y-axis. So we're going to use the head to tail method for adding vectors. So in the head to tail method we're talking about you have a vector that goes this direction. So here's the head of the vector and here's the tail of the vector. So if this is your first vector, for adding the second vector, you're going to add the vector, you're going to put the tail of the second vector at the head of the first vector. So here's the head of the vector, so you're going to add the second vector here. Or so this is in the x direction, or if we talk about the y direction, we have the vector going down like this, and our second vector is going up. So let's say the second vector is going up. Now our resultant vector is going to go in the direction of the second vector. So it starts at the tail of the first vector and goes up towards the head of the second vector. So our answer to this addition problem, this vector addition problem, is this vector. It's whatever that length is and in that direction. Alright, so let's look at some examples. Alright, let's look at adding vectors in the same direction. So remember, we're using the head to tail method. So we start with our first vector here, which is 4 meters per second to the right. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. Then we put the tail of the next vector against the head of the first vector. Then we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then our resultant vector is going to be the addition of those. So we start back here and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. All right. And so our resultant vector is 11 meters per second. And that is, we'll say, to the right. All right. Now let's look at these two vectors here. We have a 5 centimeter vector and a 9 centimeter vector. And these are plus. Upward is usually the positive direction, and over here to the right we have +4 and +7. These are pointing to the right, so they're positive. All right, these I didn't give myself quite enough room for, so I'm going to have to start down here at the bottom. So we have +5, so we go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we put the second vector at the head, the tail of the second vector at the head of the first vector. So we go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Then we got to go one little bit there. All right, so now our resultant vector is going to be the total length of both of these vectors together. So we go up, 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 up. Sorry, my drawing is a little wonky. Okay, so now this total vector, the resultant vector here, we could say is 14 centimeters, and let's call this north. All right, so that's adding vectors in the same direction. Next, we'll look at adding vectors when they're in opposite directions. Okay, so here we're going to look at adding vectors in opposite directions. You can see our two vector setups here. We have -5 meters per second and +10 meters per second. And then over here on the right side, we have -7 centimeters and +12 centimeters. So we do the same head to tail that we did before. So if we start with these on the left, we have +5. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now we put the tail of the second vector at the head of the first vector. So I'm going to draw the second vector here. So that's 5 plus another 5. Okay, now our resultant vector starts at the tail of the first vector, and it goes in the direction of the head of the second vector. So in this case, our resultant vector is 5 meters per second to the right. Now let's look at our vectors going north and south here. Okay, so let's draw our first vector. So we have 7 centimeters going downwards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then we have 12 centimeters going upwards. And remember, we start at the tail or the head of the first vector, and we put the tail of the second vector at that head. So we go up 12 centimeters. Okay, and then our resultant vector starts at the tail of the first vector and moves in the direction of the head of the second vector. So our resultant vector starts here, goes here. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So our resultant vector is 5 centimeters. It's in the plus direction, so we could say that's upward, or we could say that's north, or we could say that's 90 degrees. Those are all different ways to describe the same direction that the vector is heading in. Okay, so what have we learned in this video? So we've learned about the head-to-tail method for adding vectors. So you place vectors with the head of the next vector to the tail of the first vector. We've learned how to add vectors in the same direction. So vectors are added together. And we've learned how to add vectors in the opposite direction. In this case, vectors are subtracted. All right, thanks everybody.